Tessa Majors died after somebody stabbed her in an attempted robbery.
The case against a 13-year-old suspect will move forward.
The boy told detectives that he watched his two friends grab the 18-year-old Barnard College freshman and then put her in a chokehold. And that's when investigators say they began removing items from her pockets and then eventually began slashing her repeatedly with a knife.
We're hearing a lot of the story from a 13-year-old that's in custody. I think we should be cautious as to the story being told. Is that story accurate?
That 14-year-old boy who was taken into custody on Friday but was not arrested has now been released by police.
A manhunt right now for a third suspect.
Jumped out of a car and ran off as he was on his way to turn himself in.
We don't know too much about that 14-year-old. Investigators want to talk to him. Police are searching. They're taking this investigation very seriously.
What makes kids do something like this?
Kids, 13 and 14-year-old kids. There are major developments in the Tessa Majors homicide investigation. A judge is saying the case against the 13-year-old suspect can go forward. He's facing charges of second-degree murder, robbery, and a weapons-related charge, all in relation to that college freshman's death. And there is still that massive manhunt underway for the 14-year-old who ran off while he was supposed to be turning himself in. I want to bring in trial attorney John Phillips to talk about this. You know, we talk about a brutal murder here, this brutal stabbing. Why was this 14-year-old allowed to turn himself in? Isn't this a situation where you're kicking in the door and you're saying we're taking you into custody?
If it were an adult, that would probably be true. But the law puts a premium on how you treat juveniles, how you treat children. And even though the acts by this 13, 14-year-olds are certainly ones that are as reprehensible as possible, they're still treated in family court. They're still treated like children.
And, you know, this is a 14-year-old in New York City. This is the best law enforcement that we have in the world. I mean, how is this kid able to elude police?
That's the question. One would expect people are calling and reporting exactly who this is. They know the name. But anybody that's lived in New York City, I practice in New York City, there's plenty of places to hide. They will eventually find this young boy.
Yeah, I mean, he's just 14. How many resources can he have? Speaking of the 13-year-old, in court yesterday, this case can move forward. He's saying, listen, I was just there. It was the other two who were responsible for this, assuming that he's telling the truth. Just knowing that you are a part of committing a crime, is that enough for the type of charges he's facing?
It is. So certainly there's accessory after the fact, which is after this happened, the cover-up of the crime. There's accessory before the fact, which is plotting the crime. And then there's being at the crime. And for all we know and what we're told so far, there's some of that for the 13-year-old all over the place. So he can be charged, and that's why they're mentioning felony murder, because it's the felony of the robbery plus the person died that he's a co-conspirator in, and they're waiting on the facts to sort themselves out.
There's something totally separate that's such a challenge here. There's discussions that possibly they could be charged as adults down the road. I mean, we're talking about 13 and 14-year-olds. It's hard to even get our head around that anyone could be possibly involved in something like this, let alone kids.
Right. I have an 8-year-old, and an 8-year-old's only 4 or 5 years removed, and I just couldn't imagine my child doing anything remotely even thinking about this. This isn't even in their world. But these kids are raised in a different way without the distractions and without a solid base, one would assume, such that this is their world, and they're living in a very adult world and doing a very adult crime. And I would expect at some point prosecutors will choose and the public will insist that they be prosecuted as adults.
John Phillips, great to have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.